the USA today. Again, thank you very much for coming, all of the students from urban regional planning and also from other faculties and also students from within the engineering of faculty. Now we're gonna wait for our guest lecturer and also moderator to came into our room today, and probably I'm just gonna read for our agenda today. Today we are going to have a lecture from our guest lecturer today is Professor Marlon Boarnet, and also the moderator of Professor Bambang Sustantono. Please welcome to. Okay, we'll wait. So the lecture today will be about sustainable urban mobility, new insights and development. So Professor Boarnet is a professor that has an expertise in transportation planning. He is originally based in the University of Southern California in the USA, especially located in California. And today he will be telling us some stories and doing some presentation about transportation. So because we have a lot of first year students here, probably this is going to be a inspiration if you're going to be a transportation planners and in the future, because probably Prof. Boarnet today will present about the future of mobility, especially in the research sector. We're gonna just wait. Again, thank you very much for everyone that has come and wait today. Probably if there are still of your colleagues or friends that are still downstairs or below, you could call them to get into the room because our presentation today, our lecture series is going to start it. Please welcome to the room Professor Dr. Marlon Boarnet and also moderator Professor H.C. Undip Engineer Bambang Santaro, MCP, MSCE, PhD, and also the Vice Dean of Human Resource Management, Professor Dr. Purnawan Adi Wicaksono, STMT, and our the lecture today is coming. Good morning to all participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the International Lecture Series 1, year 2025. We are very delighted to have you all here of this event today. Today we will discuss about sustainable urban mobility, new insights and development. Firstly, I would like to welcome the Vice Dean of Human Resource Management, Professor Dr. Purnawan Adi Wicaksono, STMT, and our honorable guest lecturer today, Professor Dr. Marlon Boarnet. And our honorable guest lecturer today, Professor Dr. Marlon Boarnet, is a professor of urban planning at the University of Southern California, Price School of Public Policy, and the director of METRANS Transportation Consortium USA. And will be the moderator of today's session is Professor Insinyur Bambang Susantono, MCP, MSCE, PhD. And also I'd like to welcome to our beloved lecturers from Urban Regional Planning Departments, from the engineering faculty, students, and everyone who joins offline in Professor Eko Budihardjo building. Before we jump to the main event today, I would like to ask all of the participants to rise to sing the national anthem of Indonesia Raya. Thank you very much. You could please back to your seat. Now I would like to welcome an opening speech from the Vice Dean of Human Resource Management, Professor Dr. Purnawan Adiwicaksono, STMT. The time is yours.
Good morning. Welcome, Professor Boarnet from University of Southern California. And I think Sugeng Enjang, Professor Bambang Sustantono. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and colleagues and students, good morning and welcome. It is my great honor and enthusiasm that I open today's special lecture, a part of ongoing commitment to academic excellence and global collaboration. Today, we are especially privileged to host a distinguished international lecturer from the University of Southern California, an institution globally recognized for its innovation, interdisciplinary research, and impact-driven scholarship. Our guest today, especially Professor Boarnet, is a leading expert in the field of METRANS Transportation Consortium. And I think this is very relevant with sustainable urban mobility, a topic that is increasingly vital as cities around the world grapple with rapid urbanization, climate change, and the need for equitable transportation system. Under the theme Sustainable Urban Mobility, New Insight and New Development, we will gain valuable perspective on how urban mobility is evolving and how we as planner, policymaker, scholar, I think, and citizen and student can contribute to building smarter, greener, and more inclusive urban environment. We are confident that today's lecture will not only expand our understanding of sustainable mobility, but also inspire new thinking and collaboration across discipline. On behalf of my team, I would like to extend a very warm welcome and sincere thanks to our speaker for being here with us today. We are truly honored by your presence. Without further Please join me in welcoming our guest lecturer with a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Purnawan, for the welcoming remarks. Maybe Professor Purnawan could stay on the stage here because we're going to do a handover of souvenirs from the engineering faculty to Professor Boarnet. And also after, we're going to take some documentations from photos for documentation purpose. Thank you very much to Professor Purnawan. Before we end this, probably we're gonna take a pictures with all the participants. The photographer gonna take picture from the front. Yes. A group photos with all of the participants today. Yes. Yeah. For all of the participants, I could stand up probably so I could fit in the pictures. One, two, three, cheese. Thank you very much for our documentation purpose today. And now is the time for our main agenda today. Our main lecture series today. Please welcome to the stage Professor Marlon Boarnet and also Professor Bambang Sustantono as a moderator. And also we'll hand this session to Prof. Bambang Sustantono. The time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Pagi semua, sehat semua, pimpinan bangsa ini, calon-calonnya ya, katanya ya. Pak Wadek, teman-teman dari profesor dari beberapa departemen. So, let me introduce you in bahasa, Marlon ya. Hari ini kebalik nih, yang pakai batik saya sama Marlon, yang lain pakai formal, pakai dasi. Kira-kira 40 menit ke depan, Profesor Marlon akan share kepada Anda semua new insight, new research di bidangnya beliau, urban mobility sebetulnya. Ya. Di situ ada beberapa new development, dan saya pikir time for you to ask ya. Don't be shy, take a note. If you want to go further, you can go Google also. If you want to be more precise in your questions, you can go and Google and add some questions. But I think he's here to share with us his thinking on the urban mobility and also the new innovations in research, especially in transportations. Yeah, I'm not going to introduce Professor Marlon Boarnet. You can Google by yourself his name, right? Because we want to really make use of the time for him to share with you. Yeah, I mean that feel free to ask him questions after this. Without further ado, may I introduce to you Professor Marlon Boarnet. Please, Marlon.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you so much to Professor Bambang Sustantono, to the entire team, the leadership of the School of Engineering and the departments, to everybody who has helped arrange this visit. And the hospitality has been so wonderful. Thank you to all of you who are here. And as I understand, you are mostly students here, right? It's my pleasure to be here. Transportation. I often get the question, how do we solve our transportation problem? And the interesting thing is that there's not one transportation problem. Transportation is a multidisciplinary field. It touches urban planning, urban design, civil engineering, economics, computer science, human behavior, public policy. I could go on and on. So there's many things that we expect of our transportation system. And the question is, how do we best manage that? What I want to cover are 5 ideas that I think are important in any city or country's transportation system. And that will be my goal, is to go through those quickly enough that you have time for questions. So I want to talk about throughput, efficiency, land use, technology, and goods movement. And so this will be a pretty quick tour. So let me get started. Throughput. What you see here are the estimates of the number of persons that you could move per direction per hour with different transportation technologies. A lane of highway can at best move around 2,000 to 2,200 vehicles per hour. More than that, due to congestion, you actually are moving fewer vehicles per hour, not more. If people are mostly one person per car, and certainly in the United States, that's the situation, then what you're looking at is maybe 2,600 persons per hour. You could move more persons per hour with a bus rapid transit, a light rail transit. And the most interesting thing is heavy rail transit. Large, efficient subway systems usually, with headways at every 2 minutes. In the best systems, we can get those down to every 90 seconds. That technology, the best estimate is that you can move 40,000 to 50,000 persons per hour per direction. In our large mega cities, and I would suggest that Jakarta would be an excellent example, what the implication is that if you were to try to move as many people on a highway system as you could move on a highly efficient subway, 50,000 persons per direction per hour, you would need 25 lanes of freeway in each direction. 25 lanes in each direction, 15 lanes total. This is the first problem of megacity transportation. If we try to run our megacities on cars only, we run out of land. That's the way I describe it to people. You literally don't have enough land that you can move the people back and forth that you need to move. And this is why our largest global cities have an important role for heavy rail transit. So I don't recommend heavy rail transit in every city, but in the large cities, it's essential. You have to be able to have a throughput and a hierarchy of systems that are working together, including the feeder systems. So that's really fundamental. Once you get that in place, it'd be wonderful to run it efficiently. And we have a great deal of difficulty running our transportation systems efficiently, mostly because worldwide we have resisted using pricing to manage travel demand. What I'm showing you here is some information from congestion pricing in New York City. And the small map in the upper right with the orange area is the congestion pricing zone, which began to charge $9 per car to enter that zone just this past January 5th. And that congestion pricing zone is essentially the bottom half of the island of Manhattan, from what we would call the financial district, north through the cluster of office buildings in Midtown, ending at 60th Street, which is essentially the bottom of Central Park. It's really the economic hub, arguably the cultural hub, possibly the entertainment hub of the United States. Now, I'm from Los Angeles, so I'm not going to give New York City the title of the entertainment hub of the United States. So when congestion pricing went into effect, the basic data on year changes was that car traffic dropped by 11% in that area. Car speed increased 15%. Commuters saved up to 21 minutes per trip. And the bottom graph, and I apologize, you can't quite read it, but it's a time of day graph of the minutes it takes to get through one of the bridges. It's actually one of the upper bridges from New Jersey into Manhattan. And the blue line was number of minutes before congestion pricing. The red line was number of minutes after congestion pricing. That trip through one of the tunnels coming under the river dropped from about 20 minutes to 10 minutes. Bus ridership increased 9%. Subway ridership increased 6%. Broadway show attendance increased 19%. Restaurant reservations increased 5%. There was a lot of concern among businesses. You're going to charge vehicle traffic. What will happen to our customers? The answer was your customer base increased because the congestion went down. People could get there more reliably, more conveniently. And there was 36% less crime on subways. These are year-to-year changes. I cannot promise you that every one of them was solely caused by the implementation of congestion pricing. There may have been other factors in play, but congestion pricing was certainly part of the mix. This is a policy miracle. You do one thing, you reduce crime by 30%, you increase bus ridership 9%, you increase car speed by 15%, you increase visits to businesses. This is shocking. There is very little else that we could do in the policy world that would do all these things instantly. It's a policy miracle, and it is surprising to nobody who has studied transportation. We have been arguing in the transportation world that effective congestion pricing to manage demand can deliver fantastic benefits that would spread beyond the transportation system. And so this is one indication. So if you're keeping track, you want to think about building a system that manages a hierarchy of throughput from neighborhood to major backbone systems. You'd love to use prices to price that system efficiently so that you are dispersing demand across the system and across time of day. You need to integrate it with land use. This is so important. The way we build our cities is influenced by transportation, and transportation influences the way we build our cities. There's a very small map in the bottom right of the corner that has an area of blue and an area of red. And I apologize that that is so small. That's metropolitan Los Angeles, approximately 120 kilometers north to south, approximately 120 kilometers east to west. Households that live in the blue area drive about 20 to 40 miles per household per day. Households that live in the red area drive more than 60 miles per household per day, easily 60 to 80 miles per day. If we could move a household from the urban fringe to the urban core, their driving would drop. In fact, one of the key issues is to figure out how you would actually understand what would happen. And I've done a lot of econometric research in my career to try to separate what we would call the causal impact of transportation on driving behavior. One of those studies leads to the implication that if you could move a household from about 60 kilometers outside of Los Angeles to about 8 to 10 kilometers from the central business district, their driving would drop by about 18%, simply where you locate the growth. If you could bring rail transit to a neighborhood, you could reduce household driving in that neighborhood by 40%. Let me go into a little more detail on that. How do I know that? There was a rail transit line that was extended from downtown Los Angeles to the University of Southern California campus, and then going out towards a little bit of what we call the west side of the city. And it opened in 2012. And we used that to study how people traveled before rail transit reached their neighborhood and after rail transit reached their neighborhood. In other words, we tried to mimic what you would do with clinical drug trials. You would give a treatment to a group of people. You would have another group of people who would be a control group, and you would measure behavior, both in the treatment group and the control group, before the treatment and after the treatment. And my argument was that in transportation, we do this all the time, but we don't use it as an opportunity to see how travel behavior changes. So what we did is we said, well, these are neighborhoods that are about to receive a treatment. And what the map shows you are approximately 1 kilometer circles around 6 new stations that opened up in 2012. And then the irregular area around it that seems to be, a square, a polygon, another polygon, are households that lived beyond that kilometer area, but within 2 miles of that station. But they were carefully chosen to be in the same neighborhood, similar demographics, similar economic conditions. Households living within the circle were the treatment group. Households living beyond the circle were the control group. We administered a 7-day survey to both the treatment households and the control households, and asked them to track their travel on each day, their driving from what is called the odometer on the car, where literally we said, go and mark down the number of miles on the car, which has an advantage of being a very accurate form of gathering driving. I promise you, if you ask a person, how far did you drive? You have to wonder about the accuracy of that response. We had them write down the mileage from the vehicle itself, and several other characteristics. And the basic idea is that, and then we administered that in what we called 3 waves. First wave was 6 months before the rail transit opened up. No rail transit in these neighborhoods. Second wave was 6 months after our opening. Third wave was, actually it was 18 months after opening. There's a typographical error in that bottom slide. And so the logical idea is that before opening, the amount of driving in the experimental and control group need not be identical. It might actually differ. But what you would be looking for is, does that difference grow? And if that difference got larger somehow, the incremental difference that I'm highlighting with that red arrow would be what you might infer the effect of the treatment on the experimental group. So we're just looking for changes, experimental relative to control. So what did we learn? Before opening, look at the top row. Vehicle miles traveled is abbreviated VMT. Before opening, we found that what's labeled experimental, which I'm calling the treatment group, households within a half mile of a new station, drove 27 miles per day. The control group also drove 27 miles per day. And the T statistic for the differences between those means is 0.59. At any common statistical significance level, there is no difference between driving treatment versus control before rail transit opened up. Go out to 18 months after, treatment group driving has dropped to 23 miles per day. Control group driving increased to 34 miles per day. We have some ideas of why that occurred. And the difference has now opened up to be a 10-mile per household per day difference, treatment versus control. The T statistic for that is significant at common 5% significance levels. So voila, give a neighborhood a rail transit system. What we're detecting is drops in driving relative to control group of 10 miles per household per day, which is about 40% of the pre-treatment mean value. This is a huge reduction. We saw some increases in rail transit trips per day, not very transit oriented, so not a lot. We actually worked to decompose that. Why was it that driving dropped? And the primary thing that we found is if you look at car trip length among train users and non-train users before opening, people who had used the train system, there was rail transit elsewhere in the city. So there were people who were rail transit users before opening, just not in this neighborhood. Their car trip lengths were very similar. Go out to 18 months after opening, people who now were using train have dramatically shorter car trip lengths when they drive. People who are not using the train have maintained that still approximately 9-mile per household per day car trip length. So when the rail opened, it was not strictly mode shift. It was that the people who continued to drive in these neighborhoods were taking shorter driving trips, more than likely a combination of a land use effect and the change in overall connectivity. The other thing that's happening, and I'll have to move over this a little quickly, the persons after opening who were using the train began to look more like the persons who were not using the train in terms of car availability, in terms of household income. So in some sense, the train system was doing what we might have hoped. It was drawing new users into the system who were of a higher income and higher car availability. And so making the system basically reach into individuals that had other options who were not using the rail system in these neighborhoods beforehand. This is what I'm trying to do here is to decompose the driving reduction effect. I'm not going to try to walk you through every step of this because if I did, I would use up too much time. The short answer is what we found is the reduction in driving, half of it, 48%, was due to shorter driving trips. 20% was due to persons mode shifting from driving to rail. And so this is important. When we think about building transit, we're sometimes too focused on the mode shift. Get people out of their car, into the bus, into the rail system. That was important, but there are ripple effects. There are other effects. And one of the other effects was that people who kept driving were driving less. And that actually led to more than twice as much driving reduction than we were getting strictly from mode shift. Meaning if you're thinking about mode shift, you quite possibly are underestimating the impact of a new transit system. So very quickly to recap, household driving dropped by 10 miles per day. The gap persisted. Our last observation was 18 months after opening. It did not go away. Increases in rail trips, and 2/3 of the driving reduction is attributable to shorter car trips among people who were riding rail. I want to cover regional vehicle miles traveled, but I'm going to have to skip over some of the details in these slides. This is a larger map of what I showed you earlier. USC is approximately at the end of that arrow. The basic idea is if you could logically move a household from one of those areas in red to one of those areas in blue, you'd be moving that household from places where people drive 60 to 80 miles a day to places where people drive approximately 20 to 40 miles per day. But is it a correlation or is it causal? How many of you have heard the nostrum? Correlation is not causation. Have they covered that? Certainly they have. And all my students now tell me, but correlation is not causation. Very important thing. Finally, I end up telling them, you know what? Correlation is not causation. We need to keep looking at this. So what we did is we did a study to try to really figure out, could we infer a causal effect? That's very difficult. I'm not going to go into the details, but for those of you who like regression equations, here's one for you. We took data on vehicle miles traveled, and we regressed it on what we call accessibility, which was density in a surrounding census tract and a measure of access to jobs. And then household characteristics, income, household size, whether or not the household was living in the urban core, which would have been Los Angeles or Orange counties. We had data on 14,817 households from 2012. We divided the region into what I believe is 48 employment subcenters. And those are numbered and they're actually shown on the map. And the numbering actually goes from the largest employment subcenter is number 1 to the smallest employment subcenter is number 48. And the reason we did that, Los Angeles has a very multi-centric job structure, a lot of employment clusters. And then we developed a measure of access to employment. And I'm moving quickly over the econometrics, but we needed a way to make a causal inference. So we needed something that would be uncorrelated with driving behavior and land use today, but might be correlated with the subcenter structure. We used what are called in the econometrics deep lags, old characteristics of the geography of the region that might be related to the subcenter structure today, but may have no relationship to driving behavior. Because if that would work, that could give us an estimate of a causal effect. We used the Pacific Electric red car stations, which is a system that was widely built in the region in the 19-teens into the 1920s and have been fully dismantled by 1961. We used a 1939 highway plan that was never implemented, but actually influenced later plans. We used a small yellow car line transit system, which again have been implemented by have been eliminated by the 1940s. And we used the location of the original Spanish settlement of Los Angeles, the original downtown, and the distance from downtown, and that would have been from the 1700s. Characteristics that arguably might have had some influence on the region's employment structure, but because they're gone, have no influence on driving. We run various regression models. We get an influence on access to all jobs. If you're living in a location that has better job access, you drive less. That's what the negative coefficient means. We back out an impact effect. And what we found was that 18%, here it was actually 16% driving reduction. that if you move a person from approximately the suburban fringe to the center, their driving reduces by about 16 to 18%. And there's been many other studies that have done something similar. Let me keep going to go through the high level. We've got throughput, efficiency, land use, technology. We know the future will have some combination of on-demand, autonomous, and shared transportation. The crucial question is, can we get all three? I promise you, if we get on-demand and autonomous, but not shared, we are not going to solve our transportation problems. The question is, will the driverless future look like what you were seeing on your left? An individual by themselves in a vehicle where they could lie down and take a nap and maybe travel 2 hours from home to work and then facilitate more sprawl and maybe even more traffic congestion? Or would it look like what is on the right? That's actually a vehicle that is running in a test circumstance, autonomous vehicle that would be a shared shuttle bus. On the bottom, you're seeing an aerial view of beach communities in the South Bay of Los Angeles. The 5 young gentlemen carrying the surfboard are actually the Beach Boys rock band from the 1960s who grew up in this neighborhood. So these beach communities are what you might imagine Southern California to be. And we did a study of these beach communities 20 years ago, and we found that 70% of the trips in these communities are less than 3 miles. Trips are short. The problem is, in many countries, we put ourselves into 2 tons of metal by ourselves to go on that very short trip. Could you build a system that is rapid, that is light, that is shared? And I would argue that might be that autonomous shuttle circulator system. That may be the method to bring transit into low density neighborhoods where currently it's not economically viable. So we need planning, we need design to have the future look like what's on the right rather than what's on the left. And the last thing I want to mention is goods movement. Los Angeles has 2 ports, the ports of Long Beach and the port of Los Angeles. They sit side by side. They are the entry point for 40% of all containerized traffic that enters the United States. Combined, they are among the largest ports in the world. They anchor a warehousing, retailing, logistics industry that is responsible for 1 in 9 jobs in Southern California. But they also anchor a complex that relies heavily on truck and rail movement, particularly truck movement, to move the containers from dock to what is a massive warehousing system that really spreads the region. And the fine particulate emissions, PM 2.5, that are not solely due to truck traffic, but that are in large part due to truck traffic, diesel trucks, is responsible for 5,400 premature deaths each year in California. So a tremendous economic anchor, a huge source of environmental disamenities. Truck traffic within the state is responsible for 8% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So this is what I mean when I say don't forget goods movement. Goods movement is vital for our economy. The efficiency of the system, the connectivity of the system, but also how green the system is. What you're seeing here is a picture of a battery electric heavy duty truck, a drone. These technologies are being implemented. They are not yet ready to scale. There are technical challenges with all of these, but this is, I think, what we need to be thinking about in goods movement. How do we transform the system in a way that becomes both more efficient and more green? So let me wrap up. What do we do? What I would argue is we should take these lessons and do 4 things. We should plan for land use transportation integration. We should build high throughput nodes along linear corridors with coordinated land use at density, and then feeder systems that efficiently feed neighborhood traffic into those. And that's an aerial view of Arlington County and suburban Washington, D.C., one of the few places that actually had that strong corridor arrangement literally above a subway system. We should plan for technology. We know that technology is disrupting transportation. The key thing is we need to be sure that that becomes shared rides, efficient, low cost, on demand, in ways that facilitates organizing corridor-based land use and doesn't facilitate additional sprawl. We should plan for the unexpected, because that happens. This image is from the wildfires that hit the city of Los Angeles in early January. It was tragic. Several people lost their homes. Unfortunately, persons lost their lives. One thing we do know is that natural disasters of this sort and of different sorts will be becoming more severe, more frequent. The transportation system has to be able to be readapted rapidly to evacuate, to accommodate changes in connectivity when disasters occur, to be able to facilitate the recovery and the reconstruction. And then I'm showing the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, which will host the opening of the Olympic Games in 2028. And when that happens, this will be the only venue that has hosted the opening of 3 Olympic Games. And I say that because that will also create unexpected and highly unusual travel patterns. Mega events, whenever there is a World Cup final, an Olympic Games, a major concert, also disrupt travel patterns. We have technology available that would allow us to track, to build scenario models, to build real-time digital twins that could allow control and immediate adaptation of the transportation system. We are not effectively using that technology. So we need to become better at planning for the unexpected, and we need to plan for economic growth. Transportation anchors the economic growth of a region. And we need to be sure that we're aware of that and plan for that. So I'm thrilled to be here. I gave this talk last in Jakarta. I should have changed the slide to say Semarang also. I want to briefly mention the center that I direct. We produce over 30 research reports and over 100 refereed articles every year. We have within USC 15 to 20 researchers across our partner universities, over 100. At USC, our faculty are in degree programs that reach over 1,000 students each year. And I put at the top of this one of my favorite movie symbols. And I think many of you, this movie was before your time. It was a movie called LA Story in 1991. And the lead actor in that, comedian Steve Martin, was getting love advice from freeway traffic signs in Los Angeles, which might seem unusual. They made it work in the movie. And the sign said, LA wants to help you. I will tell you it worked out well. Eventually, the advice he got, he and the woman that he was courting lived happily ever after. So I would hope that maybe we can have more partnerships between Los Angeles and Indonesia, Jakarta, Semarang. So I've always liked that connotation that LA wants to help you. I promise you it is true. It worked out well in the movie. Maybe it can work out well in real life. So let me conclude. So yeah, thank you. I think we have one microphone. Oh.
Oke guys, siap nggak pertanyaannya? Jadi kalau kita ngomong, I'm going to speak in bahasa first. Ini soal LA nih. Kalau teman-teman Google tahu USC ya, University of Southern California itu tempatnya benar-benar di downtown LA. Ya. Kalau ingat Los Angeles, kira-kira ingat apa? Hollywood, ya. Kemudian apa lagi? Santa Monica Beach. Yang suka nonton movie dulu ada Baywatch, ya. Ada Rodeo Drive, ada Mickey Mouse karena ada Disneyland, gitu ya. Banyak di sana. Tapi poinnya adalah beliau ini memang menyelenggarakan riset banyak dengan konteks Los Angeles, ya. Nah, tapi tentu kita bisa mengambil manfaatnya karena apa yang terjadi di Amerika, ya. kalau Los Angeles itu salah satu society yang disebut car-oriented society. Ya, one of the example of car-oriented society was in the Los Angeles, right? Martin, we can ask him later on. Jadi sebetulnya apa yang terjadi problema tentang bagaimana supaya orang itu beralih dari kendaraan pribadi ke kendaraan angkutan umum, salah satu risetnya tadi, itu yang terjadi. Mereka sekarang sedang membangun banyak sekali LRT ya, light rail trains, untuk tadi mencoba untuk mengurangi kemacetan. Terus beliau juga tadi cerita tentang teknologi, bagaimana intelligent transport system, smart transportation bisa mengurangi ataupun membuat hidup kita lebih mudah di transportasi. Beliau juga cerita tentang congestion pricing. Ini menarik, karena sebentar lagi kita akan berada di dalam debat seperti itu di Jakarta. Jadi gampangnya gini, kalau waktu peak hours nanti akan dipajekin masuk satu tempat satu daerah itu akan dikasih tol gitu ya. Kayak seperti di Singapura. Makin peak hours makin tinggi nanti di charge-nya. Tapi kalau non peak hours mungkin nol. Jadi orang yang akan berjalan menggunakan kendaraan pribadi di satu jalan akan berbayar. Makanya disebut jalan berbayar. ERP, Electronic Road Pricing, kalau di Jakarta ya. Itu sekarang kita lagi sedang diskusi tentang itu, debatnya panjang, segala macam nanti belakangan lah. Gitu. Tapi tadi dicontohkan tentang congestion pricing ya. Kemudian teknologi goods movement itu juga salah satu yang topik menarik, karena itu adalah transport dan logistik ya, tentang logistik. Oke, saya kira itu konteksnya. Jadi kita tadi banyak melihat tentang kasus-kasus di Los Angeles dan California, tapi tentu saja coba nanti direlate dengan apa yang kita alami di Indonesia. So, saya akan mulai dengan pertanyaan nakal nih nanti ke dia. Ya, nah, habis itu nanti teman-teman dulu ya. So I'm going to start a basic questions, Professor Boarnet. Can we make congestion disappear?
Can we make
Macet bisa
congestion?
hilang nggak?
Can we make congestion
Yes,
disappear?
yes.
The answer is no. I would sometimes get this question from reporters. So no. Congestion is a sign of a thriving city. You don't want to you can't make congestion disappear. You can manage it better. The only places where congestion has disappeared are places that have gone into severe long-term economic decline. One place in the US that I think of, the city of Detroit, which was the center of the automobile industry when it arose 100 years ago. And by the way, that meant that it was the Silicon Valley of its time. I tell students that the automobile was the technological invention of its day. So that city had 2 million persons in 1950, and that population has dropped to about 700,000 now. So very severe economic decline. So the short answer is no, you cannot make congestion disappear. There's not a lot of congestion in Detroit right now, but that's because so many people left. You try to manage it, and you can manage it much better.
Good. Poin pertama tuh, macet nggak bisa hilang guys. Pasti ada macet gitu kan. Yang bisa kita lakukan adalah mengelola. Kenapa nggak bisa? Ini teman-teman di teknik sipil pasti tahu. Kita mendesain jalan itu nggak berdasarkan demand maksimum, enggak. Sebab kalau kita desainnya berdasarkan demand maksimum, waktu terbanyak nanti adalah jalan itu lengang dan waste of time ya, waste of resources menurut saya. Ya, karena kita kalau desainnya maksimum ya nanti cuma pada waktu peak hour aja dia terisi dengan maksimum. Di luar peak hour dia akan waste. Makanya nggak pernah ada gium yang menyatakan bahwa kemacetan itu bisa hilang. Yang bisa dikelola. Ya, jadi dikelola itu artinya mungkin speed-nya akan lebih rendah gitu ya. Nah, tentu kita berharap tidak akan ada stuck. Gitu. Oke, ini pertanyaan pembuka aja. Ya, silakan, ada yang mau nanya nggak? Oke, Mbak yang di sana. Good, I love women first, right? Gender empowerment. Silakan, Mbak.
Thank you for the opportunity. I introduce myself. My name is Satya Hoironisa, and I want to ask you something related to on psychological side of urban transport. So, as you said before, that heavy rail trains is not suitable for small cities, and with a fewer riders, where revenue in smaller cities will likely be insufficient to cover operational costs, leading to reliance on subsidies and a longer return on investment. And congestion pricing is make a really good improvement, even in statistic in Manhattan. So is it more effective if we just implied something similar, like congestion pricing or the congestion pricing itself in pre-megacities as a tool for influencing human behavior, especially in urban transport? Thank you.
Thank you. So let me try to restate the question to be sure I understood what you're asking. Yeah, and I'm not sure I caught it all. One is, would congestion pricing make people happier?
The better behavior.
Better behavior.
Meaning
okay.
that they will move from the private vehicles to public transport. But another question is that is the rail-based transport suitable for the small cities, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to be cost recovery, especially if you are
Yes.
only on fare box revenue. Right?
Yes. Yeah. So let me talk first of all about, can you do rail transport in small cities? Let me go back to this slide. There's different throughput technologies. Some small cities might only need the top row. You don't have that many people, you don't need that much throughput. So you want to match the technology to the circumstance. Many cities grow. So if you thought you were in the top row and you kept growing, one problem is you have an infrastructure system that can't handle the growth. So look, don't build a large subway system in a small village, is one piece of advice. But you've got to plan for what's going to happen 30, 40 years from now. So you need to match the technology to the city. The most important thing, I really think we have an opportunity to use technology to get to this image of small, driverless, and shared. So I think there's opportunities to bring transit into cities in ways that may not have been possible before. And that's going to take a lot of planning to get to that. The congestion pricing, would it encourage people to behave better? I'm going to say yes. Now, my idea of good behavior is that demand is matched to supply. That's not everybody's idea of good behavior. And so that's what a pricing system does. In fact, it's the magic when Adam Smith was writing about the invisible hand, right? That's what he was writing about. So yes, if the price was higher, what we would call low value trips would be the first trips that would not be made. It's 8 a.m., peak hour. You don't have to go to the store at that time, but you thought you would because you have nothing else to do. You're in your car. You're contributing to congestion. If there's a toll to be paid, maybe you say, no, I'm not going to do that. That trip will now be on the weekend. Or maybe you buy more and make fewer short shopping trips. So the short answer is yes. It's a system-wide perspective. Individuals may not like it. Nobody likes higher prices, right? This is the irony. So system-wide, yes, you have much better behavior. Politically, though, you have to figure out how to communicate that the higher price is good for the overall society. No one likes high prices, so that's the challenge.
Oke, udah?
So, if I restate your answer, it's like if we implied congestive pricing in Indonesia, it would make people go into the better behavior.
People react to prices. If there were higher prices, you would see less traffic on those roads. And the trips that people most valued, that were most important, would be the trips where they would keep paying the price. And there's a logic to that. Those are the trips that we still want on the road. So the pricing becomes a good way to manage that.
Okay, thank you.
Ya, jadi kalau beliau ya, pendapat beliau tadi pasti akan mempengaruhi behavior ya. Karena orang nantinya akan berpikir harus bayar sesuatu yang sekarang free. Saya akan ada follow up dari pertanyaan Anda ke dia nih. I'm gonna have a follow up questions.
Okay.
Is subsidy justified for small city for public transport? Jadi kalau ada subsidi kan nggak mungkin cuman dari tiket itu semuanya nutup, gitu ya. Di hampir di semua negara, nggak cuma di Indonesia. Apalagi kota kecil, yang namanya bis kecil, angkot segala macam itu nggak mungkin dia 100%. Apalagi kalau yang angkutan umum yang dibiayai oleh kota ya. Saya tanya dia sekarang, kalau begitu subsidi itu nggak terhindarkan. Is it unavoidable because we cannot get all the operation and maintenance and also depreciations from the fare box, the revenue. And then perhaps you can also tell about the combinations between transport and land use so that we have the transit-oriented development.
So is subsidy appropriate for transit, particularly in places where the subsidy would be necessary, where the fare box revenue will not pay the cost of the system? I'm going to say yes. First of all, almost everywhere we subsidize the streets and the roads. People don't think about that, but if you have a motorbike, if you have a car, you get on the road, you drive, that's a subsidy. The government had to pay to build the roads. You're not paying for it. So the road system is already subsidized. So it isn't like transit is getting something that no one else got. The other thing, there are objectives beyond profitability. Transportation provides access, economic development, environmental improvements in terms of transit-oriented development. So there would be a reason to provide a subsidy for that. Some transit systems are profitable, some are not and are still vital. The New York City subway system loses money every single year. It is never profitable. If you eliminated that subsidy system, New York's economy would crater. It would cease to function. So I would say that in some cases there are strong interests in the subsidy.
Ya, jadi gitu ya. Jadi kalau nanti Anda jadi pejabat nih, teman-teman nih jadi pejabat nih, mendesain satu public transport, jangan terus minta 100% balik duitnya gitu. Karena menurut dia ya, economic benefitnya banyak. Kita nggak bicara financial visibility only, but also economic visibility. That means there is a tangible benefit, dan intangible and tangible. Kalau tangible itu yang nyata, duitnya balik gitu ya. Kalau intangible itu tadi, dari transportnya bagus, ekonominya bagus, orang berusaha, orang bayar pajak, balik lagi ke kota atau ke negara. Nah itu bisa dipakai. Gitu. Jadi ada intangible benefits for the transportation network, so that you have to calculate both. Kira-kira gitu. Ada satu lagi yang belum dia jawab sebetulnya, transit-oriented development. Jadi kalau kalian nanti menghitung satu transportation rute, itu dikombin dengan ada namanya stasiun-stasiun yang dikembangkan lebih lanjut jadi pusat-pusat kegiatan. Makanya disebut transit oriented development. Ya, karena disitulah nanti sebetulnya dagingnya tuh di situ, balik uangnya dari situ gitu. Karena di situ akan ada pusat-pusat ekonomi dan itu yang akan mengembalikan uang yang kita pakai ataupun membiayai menutupi dari operasi dan pemeliharaan. I'm talking about the transit-oriented development because we can combine both the transportation and land use. And then you mentioned about the land value capture. Maybe you can also share with them what is the land value capture, right?
So the idea of land value capture, transportation increases land value nearby because the accessibility is valuable. So the idea of land value capture is that when you build a transportation system, you have some way to recover or tax the increase in land value. So had you mentioned the Hong Kong subway system, that's one of the best cases of land value capture, where the Hong Kong MTR, which operates transit, obtains the land from the city government. They become the landowner. They build the system, and then they build very dense transit-oriented developments near that, and they lease those properties and use the lease revenues to pay the funds that they borrowed for the construction of the system. So you can actually use the increase in land value as a revenue mechanism to fund transportation.
Good. Dapat ya. Jadi yang namanya land value capture itu kan kalau ada jalan atau akses, pasti harganya naik. Nah, kenaikan harga tanah itu yang di capture. Makanya disebut land value capture. Jadi misalnya sekarang tuh harga tanah, saya ngarang nih ya, 100.000 per meter. Nanti begitu ditaruh jalan jadi 500.000. 400.000 itu di capture dan dikembalikan ke negara untuk membiayai lagi pembangunan di tempat lain atau di situ. Makanya disebut land value capture. Dan ini sebetulnya sangat umum di beberapa negara, terutama di Hong Kong, beliau mention di Tokyo, di Jepang juga umum. Itu salah satu cara untuk tadi menambah pembiayaan tidak hanya dari tiket, karena tiket pasti nggak nutup. Ya, tiket pasti nggak nutup. Apalagi kalau kita bicara affordability, ya, keterjangkauan, pasti nggak nutup. Gitu. Oke, next questions. Nah, hebat ini. Women's rule. Silakan, Mbak.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah. Please let me introduce myself. My name is Raina Alia Aziza. I'm a student from Urban and Regional Planning. And first of all, thank you for coming and give us incredibly insightful lecture today. And it was such an honor to meet you both, Professor Marlon and Professor Bambang. And may I take a look on my notes?
Thank you. If you want to read, also take your time.
Thank you very much. Previously, you said that research help and technology help us for build and sustainable mobility systems. But in what practical ways can urban planners incorporate citizen participation in designing sustainable mobility systems to ensure that the resulting policies are not merely top-down frameworks, but truly inclusive, responsive, and reflective with local needs? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent question. And this is one of the challenges in transportation. Because we build the systems often top down. So my first answer is this is always a challenge. So you need to be talking to communities, and there may be some balancing. The needs of a local community may not be consistent with how this system was envisioned. You would want to constantly discuss. Let me give you one insight. Hang on a second. Let me see. Go back to this study. let me show you the neighborhoods. So I'm trying to get back. Hang on. There we are. So when we were studying, this was from 2011 to 2013, this new rail system, we were actually going into the neighborhood, but that was mostly to get survey respondents who were going to participate in this 1 week long, travel diary. And it was fairly extensive. We actually had them wear a mobile geographic positioning system device on a belt, an accelerometer. So there were a lot of meetings with each survey respondent. So you asked, how do we get feedback from the community? The research question that we had developed was, will the rail transit system lead to less driving? And as we were meeting with the survey respondents, one thing that I learned was that was not the question that they thought was important in their community. These are what you would call oftentimes lower income communities in Los Angeles. Their question was, once the rail system was built, would land values increase and would they be able to afford to live there if they were a renter 5 years into the future, 10 years into the future? So I don't have a magic answer for you. But one answer is, this is going to sound a little simple, talk to people. So I had formed this research question without talking to the community. We did the study anyways, by the way, because learning things is good. But then we learned also that they were worried about gentrification and displacement. And we formed later research studies to try to get at that. So my simple answer is, as planners, we always have to be talking to the community. And we'll always be learning that what we conceptualized as being the important thing is not what the community thought. So you want to, you're in partnership over time, is what I would say.
Marlon, you touched about the gentrification.
Yes.
Can you explain to them?
Oh, so gentrification would be the process where the transportation investment changes the system. Here's the issue. I mentioned that land value capture, if you build a transportation system, land prices go up, which will happen if your transportation investment was successful. If land prices go up, a low-income renter may not be able to afford living there. They move out, a wealthy household moves in, and you've changed the neighborhood from one that is affordable to one where only wealthy people live. That's a risk, and it's a real risk. And so we're trying to balance a lot of things. So I think you were going to ask something.
Mau ada follow up lagi? Questions? No?
No,
Clear?
it's very clear.
Oke.
Thank you so much.
Jadi nanyanya nanti ke penduduk yang benar, gitu kan, supaya jangan nggak ada partisipasi. Pernah denger NIMBY nggak? NIMBY atau LULU. Kalau di Amerika itu ada dua itu. NIMBY adalah not in my backyard. Lu boleh bikin jalan, terus kemudian cari tempat untuk solid waste disposal, tapi nggak di tempat gue, gitu, kira-kira gitu. Boleh lah bangun gitu kan, that's a one term. Atau LULU, locally unwanted land use. Kedua itu biasanya orang-orang yang kaya tuh kalau ada proyek baru yang bikin noise, bikin air quality issues going down, right? They don't want it. They just want that, their neighborhood is good, is environmental friendly, air quality good, and when you try to build some highways there, they will react negatively to you. That's why there is a NIMBY and LULU. I told them that NIMBY and LULU is very famous in the US case, because usually they will react to that. I mean, that usually in the affluent neighborhoods, they would like to not to have something that, changing their environment. Okay, next time. Depan lagi atau belakang? Saya ke belakang. Silakan, dulu belakang. Habis ini Mbak ya. This is all women. I mean, that I'm quite surprised. Someone, Mbak Eka itu tadi. Yeah. Eka is my student.
Yeah,
My doctoral student.
I'm Eka. Thank you for your lecture, Prof. Marlon. My question is, from your research, it's demonstrated that the fixed rail investment could impact on the household travel behavior, especially supported by the good land use. But in Indonesia, there is the urban expansion tend to be fragmented, and there is spatial mismatch, and the weakness of TOD principle. In your perspective, do you think that kind of rail investment could change the travel behavior in Indonesia with all the spatial mismatch, and what we can do as planners to deal with the urban fragmentation to achieve the sustainable mobility? Thank you.
So could building rail transit help solve the spatial mismatch problem? That's what you're asking. Did I get that? I want to be sure I got that right. Is that kind of the core of your question?
No, so our condition is different with the condition in LA. So in your perspective, is it the rail, the fixed rail, like the open of LA? Sorry.
Yeah.
Is it
Yang mismatch, Mbak Eka? What is the
spatial
mismatch one?
The-
Spatial mismatch between
No.
job and housing or something?
No. The land use. The land use is tend to be fragmented in Indonesia. So the rail could the rail investment impacted our travel behavior like in LA?
Could the investment influence travel behavior?
Yes.
But I think you're wondering, given that land use is fragmented, okay, and by that you mean that there are many city and governments that have land use authority. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes.
Okay,
It's in the core problem.
yeah. Rail transit can work well to help adjust travel behavior to be sustainable if we plan for it. And so the planning does require that the land use change that you hope will occur. And so the different governments have to be willing to allow that. So I don't know the Indonesian context, but a common problem is that we build our rail transit systems and we don't allow the adaptation of the land use. You'd want, for example, transit-oriented development, and oftentimes the government would not allow the construction at the higher density level that would be required. So generally, you need a good, predictable, sustained planning framework for about 20 to 30 years to be able to have that land use adaptation. So I don't know the context of the fragmentation here, but this is a problem that I think occurs worldwide, where the rail transit systems are often metropolitan or regional in scale, and the local government has often a small part of that, and there has to be a way to bring those into cooperation. Is that kind of what you were wondering?
Yes. So the solution is we have to plan the land use not fragmented, right? Like sorry.
Yeah.
So the solution is it have to be supported by good land use.
You cannot change the land use overnight, Eka.
Yeah.
The land use is there, and urusan pertanahan di Indonesia ini ribetnya nggak karuan, benar ya Pak? So I don't think that there is a magic answer to that, because we have a lot of informality in land management in Indonesia. And that may be the difference between us and the developed
okay.
countries.
Yeah.
So that the informality will, to some extent, hinder the good land use and transportation integration.
There's the adaptation because in the informal settlements, there may not be a way for the land use to adapt. Right, a landowner could sell their property to a developer who would then build a large apartment building, and a person in an informal settlement doesn't have the ownership. So one problem is that yes, that's inhibiting the land use change. It's also really inhibiting one of the ways in which an individual would be compensated for that change. Meaning, if I own a small home in a place that will become a transit-oriented development, that land value got more valuable. I could sell the home, move somewhere else. Maybe I wasn't happy, but there's a transit-oriented development, but I sell my home, I got some money. It's a method of compensation. That can't work in informal settlements because the individual does not own their home. In essence, they only experience the negative of the increased land value and not the positive. So the informal settlement is important. You can't have land use transportation coordination if you don't have something that is rationalized in the settlement system. I come from a place where we have a private property market. So I would say if you don't have a well-working land market, but there are other places that have well-functioning social housing, well-functioning government systems. You need a land use system that works. So if there's large parts of the land use system that are outside of the formality, ultimately that has to be addressed, or the land use transportation integration cannot occur. Is that helpful?
Okay, bye.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. First of all, good morning, sir. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Gania Salsabila Putri. I am from Urban and Regional Planning Department, and I'm going to ask a question, which I'm sure you have visited Jakarta before, and you've noticed in areas like Sudirman or economic areas, they build apartments, shops, offices around stations, MRT systems, or like Transjakarta, which is bus system in Indonesia. This might be the real example of TOD or transit-oriented development in order to encourage people to use train instead driving. But in face of climate change and increasing urbanization, how can urban planner designers can implement TOD and that are both resilient to environmental challenges and promote sustainability mobility while ensuring equitable access and addressing socioeconomic disparity in rapidly growing Indonesian cities? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So the last part of your question was a lot. And so
you can answer by one. The first one is, how can planners implement TOD to create resilient environmental challenge and promote sustainable mobility?
So planning is complicated.
Yeah.
So I wish there was a simple how-to and you just do this, but you have to fit into the context, the economic structure, the social relationships, the behavior. So I think that somebody asked, how do you make sure you're talking to the community? So that's the first thing. I'm glad that 2 days ago I was at the Sudirman station, so I've seen what you're talking about. So part of it is to kind of, what are the guideposts? Let me rephrase it, not the how, but the guideposts. One is really land use, thinking about land use, making sure that when you build a transit system, that the land use responds. Another idea, I've become very interested in access measurements, measuring how many places you could reach in 15 minutes, 30 minutes, because that tells you it's a measure of the function of the transportation system. It doesn't tell you everything, so I'm fond of that. But let me ask, so you go ahead, continue.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, the next question is, how can we address socioeconomic disparities in growingly rapidly Indonesian cities, especially with TOD?
Yeah. And you'd also mentioned climate change.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
also the
Yeah.
effect on.
I think the key on this is to think about transportation differently. Transportation used to be about how many vehicles could you move and how quickly. And that was a good way to build transportation systems for the vehicles. But we want to build transportation for people. So what I would say is some of these, if you would think about what we call key performance indicators, the climate change would be one. What is the carbon impact of a transportation system? We're only now learning how to measure that. So measure it, have that be a goal. What is the social impact? This is where I like access. How many places can you reach? How quickly? Because that's a good measure of your availability to shop, to go to school. So I think part of this, I would say, is we have to really make these quantified goals. You know, if there was a social goal, the social goal would be mobility and have that be equitable mobility. And so my answer would be make it a goal, measure it, measure progress towards it. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you, sir. But can I have a follow-up question?
Sure.
So the follow-up questions is, how can we ensure people behavior regarding this transportation? Like, if you can see in Jakarta, even though they have efficient travel system, like the MRT system, but it still have traffic congestions in certain areas, especially in busier areas. And how can we ensure people will use that transportation?
I'm still going to say that measurement would help. The reason I say that, you can't ensure people's behavior. You can't literally tell people what to do. You could, but it would be a very bad idea. We don't really want the government that could tell me what trip I can make and what trip I can't. So this is why I would say that what that means when you talk about Jakarta, that you've built the MRT, the Transjakarta, there's still congestion, people are using motorbikes, possibly in ways that are dangerous. The more we can measure that, the more we can understand that the system has not met its goals, which could give insights into how it could be improved. So I really think that it's not about making people do things, it's about did the system achieve the goals that we had for it? And if not, that's on the system and the planners, not the people, is what I would say.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Ya, terima kasih. Masnya, silakan. Jadi tadi pertanyaan kamu tentang climate change ya. Kalau bisa kita mengurangi trip kendaraan bermotor yang tidak friendly dengan environment. Jadi kalau jadi planner, yang dipikir pertama adalah bagaimana kita meminimize trip. Ya, minimize trip. Jadi kalau nggak perlu keluar, nggak perlu buat trip, jangan pakai trip gitu ya. Ada kan sekarang ada WFA, ada WFH, ada work from anywhere, cafe, WFC kan. Itu sebenarnya ngurangin trip ya. Jadi pertama pikir cara supaya bagaimana ngurangin trip. Itu co-locations namanya. Ya, mixed use segala macam itu ngurangin trip. Yang kedua, kalaupun pakai trips, kalau bisa pakai public transport or pakai non-motorized vehicles. Kalau bisa gitu ya. Kalau nggak bisa juga, ini gue pokoknya pengen naik motor, maunya boleh, tapi harus green. Itu yang paling akhir tuh. Karena tadi Prof. Marlon juga bilang bahwa yang namanya individual behavior, you may not be able to change that. Itu karena kesadaran society akhirnya. pilihan lu sama pilihan gue beda gitu kan, kira-kira lu nggak mau naik misalnya macet, buat gue sih nggak apa-apa macet, gue ada sopir gitu, gue bisa nikmatin di mobil gue Alphard gitu kan. Nah, begitu masuk mobil gue bisa langsung kerja di dalam, ini contoh gitu ya. So pilihan banyak tapi kita memperkecil pilihan itu, salah satunya tadi dengan congestion pricing. Kalau mau pakai mobil boleh, lu bayar lebih gitu pada waktu jam-jam tertentu karena lu nyebabin macet, kira-kira gitu. Jadi as a planner you have to think how you will minimize the trips, and if you cannot minimize the trip, do it in a green way so that the carbon footprint will be very small. Yeah. Okay, Mas, silakan.
Thank you for the opportunities given. Allow me to introduce myself first. My name is Yohanan from a student from Urban and Regional Planning, class of 2024. I want to ask in the context of sustainable urban planning, should the development of cities be guided by existing and planned transportation infrastructure, ensuring that growth is concentrated around transit networks or TOD, transit-oriented development? Or should transportation system be designed to serve and adapt to the current patterns of urban sprawl, even if those patterns are dispersed and less efficient? So my question is, which of these strategies is more effective and sustainable in the long term, considering environmental aspect, economic and social factors? So which is urban sprawl is following the transportation infrastructure development, or the transportation development infrastructure is following the urban sprawl? That's it. Thank you.
So are you asking which is more sustainable, urban sprawl or transit-oriented development?
And how to contain the urban sprawl.
And how to contain,
And the linkage between those two.
and how to contain the urban sprawl.
Yes.
Generally, urban sprawl is not sustainable, but how to contain it. Sure. Yeah. One way, sprawling regions often have many employment subcenters, many central business districts. Working with those is one way to begin to contain urban sprawl. And so I'm showing you these employment centers in greater Los Angeles. The map is not so great, but so one idea is that in a sprawling region, you work to take the existing employment centers and turn those into effective transit-oriented development. So you try to transform that, and most places have something that look like that. The other idea you had mentioned a couple of evenings ago, the 15-minute city. The same idea. You're trying to build areas where people can make short trips, so that even in a sprawling region, you can fulfill a lot of your needs with very short trips, that you can do in a short amount of time. So you want a transportation system that can support that. That takes time and that takes planning, but that's one idea. To go more broadly really requires that you have good interaction between the transportation system, the way it is priced, so that longer trips are more expensive to encourage shorter trips, and the land use, so that it becomes easier to develop near the employment centers than far away. So you really need to have some mechanism that all those things can occur. I don't know if that addressed your question.
Oke, Mas.
Yeah.
Jadi yang namanya sprawl atau mekar itu sangat tidak efisien kalau pergerakannya masih monosentrik. Tahu ya monosentrik ya? pagi-pagi sama-sama ke tengah kota, sore-sore keluar kota, itu pasti nggak efisien. Tapi kalau dari monosentrik bisa jadi polisentrik, artinya kita menciptakan satu pusat-pusat baru, di mana di pusat baru itu ada satu yang disebut tadi, orang di situ kerja di situ, hidup di situ, hangout di situ, semuanya, itu dia akan self-sufficient. Itu bisa menjadi satu yang sustainable. I'm talking about the polycentrism.
Yes.
Ya, jadi kalau itu yang terjadi, itu akan jadi efisien malah. Jadi orang nggak rame-rame pagi ke tengah kota, sore-sore nanti pulang gitu ya. Jadi pusat-pusatnya itu disebar, di-concentrate istilahnya. Dan kayak Kedung Sekur misalnya gitu ya, atau kalau di Jakarta, Jabodetabek. Itu menurut saya sekarang udah nggak relevan lagi. Di Jakarta ya, Jabodetabek. Kenapa? Karena orang sekarang bisa rumahnya di Bandung, setiap hari kerja di Jakarta. Naik bus. Jadi the whole corridor itu luar biasa tuh. Gitu ya. Orang sekarang rumahnya di Cikarang, di Kerawang, kalau di Jakarta, di Serang di Jakarta, tiap hari dia commuting ke kota gitu. Itu terjadi. Tapi bagaimana kota-kota satellite itu bisa menjadi pusat-pusat pertumbuhan baru, makanya disebut polycentric, itu yang kita harapkan. Gitu. Jadi dia memecah konsentrasi, nggak sprawlnya jadi benar-benar mekar gitu ya, tapi justru sprawlnya itu menciptakan polycentric. Dan itu kalau teman-teman belajar teori dasar dari urban planning kan begitu ya. Garden cities for tomorrow misalnya. Ya, di zaman dulu itu begitu. Dia ada pusat-pusat nukleus, the polycentric, ada tengahnya, tapi mereka bisa membuat satu pertumbuhan yang lebih sustainable. I'm talking about the basic principle theory of garden cities for tomorrow, the good old days where you have the polycentric system so that it prevent the sprawl. Oke, next. Belakangnya Mas. Nanti di situ habis ini ke Masnya. Sebelah kiri ada di sini? Nggak ada cukup.
Okay, good morning, sir. First of all, my name is Faizal Saputra. I'm a student of urban and regional planning. So it's a great honor for me to have the opportunity to ask a question. Professor Bernard, your research has demonstrated how urban design and land use policies can significantly influence travel behavior and reduce car dependency. So based on your experience, what practical steps can cities in developing country like Indonesia take to align their urban planning and transportation policy with sustainability goals, especially considering local challenges such as rapid urbanization and limited resources? Thank you.
What practical steps can cities take to support sustainability in the light of challenges such as, what was the last?
Rapid urbanization and limited resources.
Urbanization and depletion of resources. So my advice would be a few things, and this isn't easy. If this was easy stuff, anyone could do it, right? And so in terms of practical steps, I'm going to come back to measurement. You can't plan for what you don't measure. So you have to measure the sustainability characteristics of the system. And we're only beginning to do that. So that's the first thing. And then you need a planning and a governance system that responds to those measurements. So there have to be ways that if the goal is greenhouse gas emission reduction, that's a key performance indicator, and that the local government and the private sector have an ability to adapt and move towards that direction. And there need to be other goals, individual mobility, access, economic vitality. So the specifics of how you do that would have to be aware of the local context. So I can't have a magic answer. but think of it this way: a good city is an adaptive system. There's a loop between a policy goal, the measurement towards that goal, the response of individuals and developers and markets and the economy and the government, and then an assessment whether progress is being made towards that goal, and if not, an adaptation. And so I think what planners really need, that's the key, to think about it as an adaptive system. And sometimes we build these systems and we say, hey, here's your rail transit. Good luck. We're glad you have this. We're going to go on to our next project. So you need to put in place this whole sense where you're going to monitor, respond, adapt. And that's a lot of different sectors across public, private, nonprofit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mas, saya kasih kesempatan di bagian sini kalau ada satu lagi habis ini, and then we wrap up. Ya. Kalau ada.
Okay, thank you, Professor Marlon and Professor Bambang, for this opportunity. My name is Akhtar, and I'm currently an urban and regional planning student. Me and Zilan, my good friend here, we're both curious to hear your thoughts considering the increasing emphasis on decarbonization and equity in sustainable urban mobility. So the question is, like, how can planners ensure that emerging mobility technologies, for example, micromobility, autonomous transit, and app-based transport, do not inadvertently reinforce existing spatial and socioeconomic disparities in our cities? Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you. And that's a good question. And there's a risk that those new technologies will reinforce existing inequities and environmental problems. If new technologies allow me to travel more conveniently in carbon emitting vehicles, then we might get more of the problems rather than less. So again, this becomes about planning and governance. You need mechanisms that provide incentives to all the actors to move towards something that is more sustainable. This is why I like pricing. If there were methods for carbon taxes, for pricing not only congestion, but the carbon impact of travel, then the system would adapt to that. You also want to be sure that you have the same incentives for development. So including a broad range of incentives for shared travel, whatever that may be. That would even touch on economic and social. So think about the incentive structure would be what my advice is, and how is that making it easier for people to choose low carbon equitable travel and more expensive to choose high carbon inequitable travel. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Ya, makasih ya. Ada yang mau nanya dari sebelah sini? Diambil ya. Ada dua tapi singkat ya karena waktunya. Silakan Mas, duluan. Di depan soalnya. Habis ini yang paling belakang, and then we wrap up.
Thank you for the lecture today, Dr. Marlon and Prof. Bambang. My name is Fidan Rahmatilla. I'm a student from Urban and Regional Planning. My ask for today, how about innovative technologies such as electric vehicle like ESV, BSV, and ETC, autonomous vehicle, and smart mobility platform can contribute to more sustainable urban transportation in US? And what are the potential drawbacks or challenges associated with their implementation when applied in Indonesia? Thank you.
How the technology will help us in terms of urban
And
planning.
some of it was electric vehicles, smart vehicles.
Yeah.
Yes.
And technology. So again, you have to think about the whole system. So electric vehicles are only as clean as the method used to generate the electricity.
Yeah.
So you have to transform the energy infrastructure.
Yes.
And then part of it is to think about how you are actually adapting as the technology becomes ready. 25% of all the cars sold in California today are battery electric. So one thing we've seen is that passenger vehicles are rapidly reaching the point where the economics and the performance are well acceptable to the market. So that's a technology that has arrived, and it means the infrastructure has to arrive. What does the charging system look like? What does the power distribution look like? Are you generating that power from solar and wind, or are you generating it from coal? Because if you're running your electric vehicle fleet off of coal-powered generation, you have not solved a climate change problem. So these are big systems. So they're and that's one thing to be aware of, is that every nation now has the challenge of transforming their major infrastructure systems. And then how can technology help? Smart information, monitoring. There's a role for that. Here's my caution. We tend to think that the next technology will solve everything. It generally doesn't. So the problems remain. In other words, there's a lot of technological innovations in vehicles, driver assist, self-driving, which isn't really quite here yet. And so the monitoring, there's all kinds of ways to monitor the performance of vehicles and systems. Those can lead to efficiency enhancements, safety improvements. We've not really leveraged the safety capability of these technologies, but I think there's a lot that could be done. The basic problems remain. I mean, what you're looking at are countries that have to figure out how to move off of fossil fuels onto alternatives. What does that look like? Where is that sourced? What are the international, trade patterns for constructing that? What does the infrastructure look like? Is that done in a way that supports communities or that does not? These are huge challenges. So my caution is the technology doesn't make the planning go away. And I promise you that people think that. But so part of it, I think planning has to stay there. It has to still be a central part of the process.
Good. Last one, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Muhammad Feroyan from Urban Energy Planning Department. This is a short question. I want to ask you, in Jakarta, many areas still lack sufficient infrastructure to support equitable public transportation, like in Manggarai and Kampung Ayer. Like they had narrow roads and limited access. This often leads residents to prefer private motorcycles due to their flexibility. From an urban planning perspective, what would be an effective approach to enhance public transportation, accessibility, and inclusivity? Thank you.
Can you say that again? You started with public transit and then motorcycles.
Oh, yeah.
Give me the key question.
In Jakarta, there's still area that lacks sufficient infrastructure to support equitable public transportation, such as narrow roads and limited access. This often lead residents to prefer private motorcycle for their flexibility.
So kind of how to enhance public transit,
Yes.
including the access
Yes.
problem. And maybe your mention of motorcycles, partly some people may take a motorbike to the public transit.
And sometimes they use the motorcycle to their like working place or something.
Exactly, or instead of public transit. Yeah. The general answer on that, we now talk about what we call the first last mile problem. How do you build both a design and a system that gets people efficiently to a transit station and from there destination transit station to their final destination. So we need to be much better at thinking about that first last mile problem, maybe the first last kilometer or two, and the way the transit system integrates. So part of this is changing our thinking. Transit agencies used to think about, well, once you reach, you get on the bus, get off the bus, that's our problem. Their problem is broader. It's that whole trip, and the transit agency and a planner needs to be aware of it. Let me give you one example of a simulation that we did. We simulated the number of jobs that you could reach in 30 minutes traveling by transit from the lower income neighborhoods in the city of San Diego. And what we found is, first of all, that if you were traveling by transit, the number of jobs you could reach was much smaller than the number of jobs you could reach by car. That was the first finding. But then we said, how could we improve that? The most powerful way to improve it was by increasing first last mile access. What we did is we literally said, let's imagine that you were going to your bus station, and from your bus station, not at walking speed, but at bicycle speed, kind of the speed of bicycle, micromobility, things such as that. That led to a larger increase in the number of jobs that you could reach than if we said, another simulation was, what if we took the entire San Diego transit system and moved the entire system to a frequency of 10-minute arrival everywhere, which would be wildly expensive. We hadn't even tried to calculate that. So the short answer is that a transportation planner would have said more frequency. What we found is you could get much more of an accessibility improvement by moving people back and forth to the station. Just from walk speed to bicycle speed was a more powerful tool. I think your question was how to do that. The how to do that becomes the details of planning. How do you build a design that can support good walking travel, good bicycle travel, inviting, safe? I've become a very, very big fan of separated bike lanes. I actually think that if we could build those in neighborhoods at a scale and a width that could become inviting and accommodating, that could also help with micromobility, could help with safety problems. We don't see that much. So my short answer is you really have to think about the link from the neighborhood. And ideally, the transit agency would be an important part of thinking about that. And that's only beginning to happen, is my short answer.
Oke, yuk kita udah sampai di penghujung. Banyak banget yang kita dapat dari beliau ya. Pasti banyak juga yang mau nanya lagi, mau menggali lagi. Terus menutupnya saya pengen ada 2 quote nih. Apa sih kata-kata bijak hari ini gitu kan. 1, you do not plan what you cannot measure. Saya ambil kata-kata beliau nih. Ya, kalau kalian bikin planning, apapun planningnya, make sure that you can measure. Ya, ada KPI-nya, Key Performance Indicators. Ya, jadi nanti yang akan melaksanakan planning itu sudah di-equip, sudah dibekali dengan hal-hal yang bisa menjadi indikatornya dia. Ya, you do not plan what you cannot measure. Yang kedua, planning is a complex matters. Yeah. You are not in the empty environment and social situations. Yeah. Yeah. Planning itu selalu akan ada interest group pasti. Jadi yang teman-teman yang di PWK baca bukunya John Forrester, Planning in the Face of Conflict, a famous one. Because you have to understand what is the conflict issues, how to manage the conflict, how to build the consensus and stuff like that. So, Professor Marlon, maybe you can have a final conclusions if you have to the students, please.
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, you've been such a wonderful audience. So many questions, so many good questions. So I think I would come back to the public interest. We need to be sure we're planning our cities for people. And what we found is that there's so many times where we lost sight of that, where we thought, aha, here is the thing that we will do because I woke up and thought that was a good idea. So I think, you always have to think about the public purpose for planning. And what you find is that there's a lot of different goals, a lot of different public purposes. So what you're trying to do is to make sure that you're identifying those public purposes and trying to lift those in the process. That's why I keep coming back to measuring things. We have not practiced measuring what we're doing relative to outcomes. I actually have a small section in a class that I teach where I contrast some of the great architects, Frank Lloyd Wright, Le Corbusier, Clarence Perry, who were visionary thinkers, but had no role for measurement. There wasn't a piece of data anywhere in there, with Kevin Lynch, William White, who measured detailed behavior, but they weren't really building grand designs. And I try to convince students that the change makers were Lynch and White, who were doing measurement. They were giving us the tools to understand were we reaching our goals. That takes at least a whole lecture to get me there. So I would say, remember the public purpose and find a way to measure your progress towards it, is my advice.
Thank you so much. Big round of applause to Professor Marlon Boarnet. Thank you so much, and thank you for the organizers. And let me hand over again back to the MC, please.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for Professor Boarnet for such an inspiring and fruitful discussion we have today. I see a lot of interactions between the participants and also the speakers. And also thank you to Professor Bambang Sustantono for moderating this main session today. And before we close this event, I would like to say thank you, representing all the organizers of today's ILS session, for the support from the honorable guest lecturer today. We really appreciate your time for coming here and giving us lectures about sustainable urban mobility. And also to all the participants, I hope you found all the lecture today is informative and helpful for further research and studies. We hope that this event will bring inspiration and a positive impact to all of us. And please forgive us for all the shortcomings. And also we look forward to the next international lecture series that will be held at 27th of May 2025, and we look forward to come to that session by the end of this month. And I guess that's it. I hope you all have a good day. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.